Hey there, friends on YouTube, wherever you are taking part of, listening to this podcast, watching this podcast, doing whatever it is, laundry while you listen to the podcast, whatever you're doing, welcome once again to another episode of the Painfully Honest Tech Podcast. My name is Jason T. Lewis, sometimes known as the JTL, and as we do every week, we're going to talk about things tech-related in a painfully honest way. So I hope you're ready for that. If you like what you hear, you can always subscribe to the channel if you're on YouTube, or follow on whatever podcast listening service you might take part in. We do have merch. We are quite nice people. Hopefully you'll stick around and hang out. But I'm joined once again this week, where it's becoming a pattern, once again by Adam, the Tech Odyssey, Matlock.
Yes. I changed my name on here. It's Adam J. Matlock. I'm not otherwise known as the AJM, but it's instead of everybody, it's Tech Odyssey is the channel, but I have a real name.
First thing that we want to talk about today on the podcast here at 1414 in the lead up to it. First thing we want to talk about is, of course, the big news, the big doings in the tech space. Of course, the release of the iPhone 15 in all of its different permutations. I have here the iPhone 15 Pro Max. I believe you had the iPhone 15 Pro.
I have the Pro, but I also have the Max.
Oh, okay. Fancy. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a story behind that. We'll talk about it in a little bit.
Sure.
But I have both of them. So
previous to this, I had been using for about a year as my main iPhone, the 12 Pro Max. Which, the only
that's a good one.
Yeah, I really like the 12 Pro Max. I feel like it was a solid phone all the way around. Of course, there was nothing wrong with the 13 Pro Max. The 14 Pro, a lot of people had battery problems, and that sort of thing. So I gave my wife my 14 Pro Max after I did the review of it, and I checked her phone, because most people were complaining that the 14 Pro Max was losing its battery capacity precipitously, and just like
mine's at like 90%, and I hardly even used it for like a few months. So
my wife has been using hers as her everyday phone since like maybe a couple of weeks after it was released. Battery capacity still at 100%.
Well, I think a lot of it there's two things behind it. Well, three things. So we know that Apple said with the new iPhone 15 series, basically, or 14 series, they're rated for 500 charging cycles before they're supposed to be at 80%. So they're like, well, it doesn't, losing 1% every couple of weeks is actually kind of normal. But so it depends on your charging habits. I don't really like that number. I mean, if you lose a 1% like every quarter, I mean, I think that's probably acceptable, but so 500 charging cycles, like you fully recharge the phone. So if you don't recharge every day, you're not going to have as much battery degradation in the battery health department. And two, I think that the MagSafe charging, I think, amplifies a little bit.
That might be the case. I know that my wife, so she does plug hers in every night, but she doesn't use she doesn't drain the whole battery. And I do know that I always put on the smart charging.
I think that helps too.
Will also, I think it charges to like 80%. And so then you're not, if you don't recharge all the way to 100% every single time, then that helps preserve the capacity.
And that's the same thing with like my Tesla. Like I get a warning if I charge over 90%. It's like, don't charge over 90% on a daily basis because it's bad for the battery life. And if you have like the smart charging, the eco charging, if you set the battery limit to where like it basically never goes over 80-90%,
right,
then your battery health is going to be great for a lot longer than somebody who charges 100% all the time.
Yeah. And I think, my wife is a pretty typical user. She texts, she looks at the internet, she, does social media, stuff like that, and doesn't really tax her phone. I think that we can sometimes be fooled because like the green room of tech YouTube is kind of like Twitter. So there becomes like sort of an echo chamber. And in this case, I think kind of creates a false sense of reality in that I think people who are tech folks might put a lot more strain on their phones than other people might. But
You don't say.
at the same time, like my iPhone 12 Pro Max is at 87% now, and it's 2 years older than the 14 Pro Max. So, I mean, there's something definitely a little bit weird. I wondered if it wasn't potentially because of the always on screen. Because, I don't think traditionally over the last bunch of years, I don't think that Android phones have given you that view of like battery capacity possible. Right?
No. To my knowledge, if you have, I've never paid attention to it. Like that's always been an Apple thing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you can see your overall battery health, and
that's only been in the last.
5 years?
I think it came maybe with like a few versions of iOS back from now. So maybe like iOS 14 or something like that. I can't remember.
Like 12 or 13, something like that. But yeah, it hasn't been a forever feature in the iPhone.
Yeah, and I do like that they do it. I don't know about the 500 cycle thing because that just, unless they mean 500 cycles as in like you drain the battery and recharge it.
Mm-hmm.
So like 100% like down. So it's not actually 500 cycles. It might be like 1500 cycles. But because you're not using all your battery every day, and if you have that battery saving feature on, then you're not charging it all the way up either.
So here I'm looking at something. This is just a general Google search on what is a battery charging cycle definition. And it says a charge cycle happens when you use all the battery's power, but that doesn't necessarily mean in a single charge.
Right.
So basically, I think what that means is if you use 50% 2 days in a row, that's 100%. So that's one. If that two charging experiences would be one charging cycle.
Right. So you extrapolate that out. So 2 days equals one cycle. And then some days it might be less. Some days it might be more.
3. Yeah. So if you could probably say an average iPhone user probably like every 2.25 days gets a charging cycle, maybe 2.5 days.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we're talking like potentially, a charging cycle, like instead of 500 days, we're looking at potentially 1250 to 1500 days. To go through. Sense. Yeah.
I think it's fair.
So if you think about it, like, and that's just to get down to 80%. And if it does end up being like 1200 days, that's 5 years almost. Right.
Yeah. And that's about the life expectancy of a long-term iPhone user. Whereas like me, I charged this phone twice yesterday. So I'm not a normal person.
See, that's really interesting. That's another thing that I wanted to talk about because I'd been looking on Twitter and sort of following people's impressions of what the new iPhone had been like for them. See, for me, yesterday was the first day that I had 100% charge because I got it on Friday. I just used what was there. I think it was like 65%. Mm-hmm. And so I charged it all the way up and took it off the charger around 7ish yesterday morning. And of course, when I'm sitting watching TV and I was watching football, for a good chunk of the day.
That's college football day.
Yeah. So I'm kind of like, I always have my phone screen on and I'm always just like grazing the phone while, social media, whatever, while I'm watching the football, especially like you got to go through commercials and all that other stuff. And it's a timeout and it's a this, that, the other thing.
Check the scores, look at the updates, look at your Twitter. Yeah.
So I went to bed last night so I got it off the charger, let's say 7:30. I went to bed last night at midnight, give or take 10 minutes. And I had 56% battery left. I had 8 hours of screen on time.
And the Pro Max, that's good.
Yeah. I was like, oh, that's impressive. Of course, other people are they're having different experiences. I don't know if they're playing games. I wasn't playing games.
So I can tell you just from my experience, there's one huge factor that really eats up the battery life. And of course, I know this is going to sound simplistic. It's the screen brightness. Right. And if you just use it like normally, like the way that it comes in default, where the adaptive brightness, it's always turning it down and things like that, the battery will last tremendously longer. I don't like how dim it is, so I keep turning mine up because like I don't see all that great, especially in low light. So like I turn my brightness up a lot, and I was using it the other day. I'm like, wow, I've only dropped like 4% in like an hour, but it was really, really dim. And then I turned it up a lot higher, and then I killed 10% in like the next 30 minutes.
Yeah,
So,
that does make sense. And one thing I can say between Android and iOS, I find that the screen brightness when the adaptive brightness is on an Android phone is too dim for me. Yeah. So I'll bring it up to like 50% because I don't like eye searing brightness, but I also don't want it to be so dim that I can't enjoy like the colors and stuff. Yeah. But I've found that the iOS how iOS does the automatic screen brightness, it goes to a level that I don't notice it.
It is more comfortable. Like I notice it, but I don't use adaptive brightness at all on Android because, like you said, it feels like it's too dim.
Yeah.
And so I, as a default, keep my brightness at about 80% on Androids with just automatic brightness off.
Yeah. I think with Android, I forget which version of Android this came in, but that it's supposed to learn your preferences over time. And I think that works with the automatic brightness as well. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to spend however many weeks it's going to take for me to train it that I don't want it at like 10%. I want it up here. I don't know.
Set a range. I wish they'd let you go in there like, look, it won't go below 35%, but it won't go over like 80%, and give you like kind of a band. That would be better.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, like I say, for me, iOS has always handled that to the point where I don't really notice the screen brightness changing even. Mm. So that's always been a good thing for me. So I never fool with screen brightness on an iPhone unless there's some kind of extenuating circumstance. Mm. I also, and this is where YouTube in general, tech YouTube specifically, really frustrates me. So the first video I saw on launch day when I opened up Twitter was Sam Cole from Apple Track and the Genius Bar podcast dropping he had 2 iPhones and he was dropping them from like 15 feet in the air.
That was the guy that went to like Australia to get the phone first because it comes out basically like a day earlier over there and was dropping them.
He could have gone to New Zealand. But to me, okay, this is not specifically about Sam, but I feel like Sam is one of the most egregious offenders, let's say.
So like the sensationalism approach.
Yeah. And like he does it on Twitter. He tries to engagement farm on Twitter by just saying ridiculous things, like, oh, the iPhone is so beautiful, and then he does this thing, which to me, drop tests in 2016 were perhaps useful. People wanted to know, like, do I need a case? And a lot of case companies paid for them. I remember seeing, so, but this is just like, you've got a bare naked phone.
You're dropping it 15 feet on the concrete.
And you're like, oh my God, it broke. It must be less sturdy than the previous iPhone. So that's actually become a narrative now. That's actually become a narrative. I have been grazing Twitter the whole couple of days.
It reminds me of crash dummy cars. Like, you're destroying this for the purpose. Like, you're not doing it to find out how safe it is. You're just doing it for so people can watch and like, oh, the shock value.
I remember everything Apple Pro. So he doesn't really make videos anymore. But he's got millions of subscribers. He has his own case company now, and I think that's what he focuses on. But he used to do things like line up a bunch of iPhones and shoot them to see how many iPhones he could pierce.
I never heard of that before, but that's crazy.
Yeah, and so there was back in like the mid 2010s. There was a lot of that stuff, a lot of drop tests, a lot of, just sort of egregious, superficial, wasteful kind of stuff, which to me, I watch Sam do this drop test and I think you're just, how do I say this?
I made a tweet. Let me read my tweet real quick. It's very short. Because I was on the same page as you. I wrote, I hate watching perfectly good phones get destroyed for clicks. Newsflash: if you keep dropping your iPhone 15 on the concrete without a case, yes, it will break. In public service announcement.
Yeah, no, I said something similar. I was just like, this is dumb. It shows a level of entitlement that I just think is gross. And I've seen Sam. I guess I said I was not going to make this about Sam, but I kind of am. I've seen him make tweets that were really entitled tweets about, how just sort of. I don't know what his background is, but it seems like he probably came from some money. I don't know.
Some sort of influency.
Yeah. So he makes these kinds of things, and to me, I look at somebody breaking a $1,200 to $1,500, $1,600 phone on purpose without like showing anything other, like have one that has a case on it, have one that doesn't, see which one breaks first. I mean, at least that gives you something, right?
Like an education value. You can learn so like, okay, this is how much more protected my phone is if I actually put a case on it.
Yeah, so that would give you at least some sense of like what kind of protection you could expect from a case with that particular phone. But there are so many variables in there that you can't really, it's not science, it's anecdotal science, right? And so it would have some value above and beyond just clickbait.
I think principally that's what probably irritates both you and I, because I have a thing with my audience. I've said before, look, I make videos every day, but I told them before, say, if I don't have something worthwhile to talk to you about that I think brings value, I just won't make a video that day. Like, I don't believe in making videos for the sake of making videos, but I don't believe, like, I try to be as educational and informational based off my experience so I can share that with my audience.
Yeah.
I find no value in destroying a phone for clicks.
Yeah. And so I guess this is a segue. You tweeted something yesterday, a clip of John Prosser's longer video, which I didn't have a chance to watch, but the clip that you posted was sort of saying reviewers shouldn't be trying to educate.
Yeah.
And I think I went and sort of like tried to contextualize it from other things that I was watching a football game, so I wasn't going to like stop and watch John Prosser's video. No offense, John,
sure.
But it was the home team. I had to catch up. I had to pay attention. But it seemed like he was talking in a larger context, and that was sort of part of it. In my estimation, like one of our jobs as tech reviewers, I look at myself as both a tech reviewer and someone who provides tech commentary. The bigger picture of what these products mean and how they fit into our lives and how things have changed and what's looking forward and what's looking backward. And in some ways, I also comment on the people who make the tech videos.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very, very tempted to make a Can You Trust Sam Cole, Apple Track, whatever he calls himself, video, because
I miss those videos, by the way.
Yeah, I know, but they became emotionally exhausting, and honestly, I did 25 of them over a period of a couple of years. They just basically, like, once I ran through sort of the top 10 YouTube creators, it was like slowly diminishing returns in terms of views.
Yeah, nobody wanted to see a Can You Trust Tech Odyssey 3-4 years ago.
It wasn't that. I mean, even some bigger, like I did Everything Apple Pro, and he was a relatively big tech YouTuber at the time, but nobody was really interested. Like, it's always either the big ones like Linus or MKBHD, and or some other people who might be controversial.
You recently revisited one on Linus, didn't you? After the whole spoofed results drama.
Yeah, I did one on Linus, and I didn't call it Can You Trust, but it was basically a Can You Trust video. However, I kind of focused on the idea that like anything else, you can grow too big and not for whatever reason, not be able to sort of like keep pace with the growth to the point where things get missed and lost in translation and everything else. And I really feel like that's a lot of what happened with him. He went from, doing videos 10 years ago in his kitchen,
right,
to
as
having 100, having 120, having like 100 plus 125, I think they said, employees.
Oh yeah, so it's a business now.
Yeah, and you've got HR issues. You've got multiple people making videos for multiple channels, and if you don't have a strong sort of C-suite group overseeing that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, honestly, Linus probably, of course, didn't perform the benchmarks on some of that stuff. Like once you're doing like all these videos, all these products, like you're always going to sacrifice quality for speed, right?
Right.
So to some degree, so yeah, maybe they're like, well, it's good enough, right? And our audience will think that this is fine. We'll put it out, and then you get somebody who goes nitpicky into the details, like not quite there.
Yeah, and also, I mean, a lot of the people, I mean, so the complaint was about a specific, like they have a testing department now, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if those people are on-camera people or if they're just providing information to the on-camera people or whatever. But, Linus has a decade plus of experience making YouTube videos, and he's lived and learned reviewing tech, the ins and outs of what needs to be done and what doesn't.
Yeah.
So if Linus isn't overseeing the younger people that he has making videos on a pretty granular level, like from a producer style level.
Oh, for sure. I mean, he would still have to, and even after that, have to sit there and like go through all the videos with a fine tooth comb, compare all the like the data. I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah, and if you look at it, so he's basically running a film production company, right? And so anytime you watch the end of the film and it shows all the people that worked on the film, it goes from the actors to the writers, directors, producers, et cetera, et cetera. And some producers are money producers, and other producers are like on set guiding the whole thing, and the director is making decisions about the artistic product itself, right?
Oh, there's so much that goes into it.
And you've got your writers on set who are making changes to the script as you go. But the way that it looks from the outside looking in, when you watch any of the Linus Tech Tip videos or MAC Address or Tech Linked or any of those videos, it looks like they've got a bunch of hosts who are in charge of creating X amount of material, and maybe they have a cameraman, maybe they have somebody as a support, and Linus is kind of like was always listed on there as like the producer, but there's no way Linus was actually like on set producing every one of those videos, right?
I kind of liken that, like, if you see all these videos that come out and like executive, like producer Ridley Scott had nothing to do with that.
Yeah, I mean, Ridley Scott probably agreed to put his name on there because either he gave seed money in order to get points off of the gross, or he had a relationship with the person who was going to direct, and so he produced it. I remember
he's in his 80s now.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty wild. He's making Gladiator.
85. Yeah, I was like 85 years old. I'm like, man, I wish I was that productive at like 30.
Yeah, Blade Runner is still like one of my top 2 movies. It vacillates, but
it's great. I just watched it again like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I need to watch it again. I pulled it out of the stack and have it by the TV, so I'm going to watch it again soon. But anyway, going back to the iPhone and sort of these specious tests that are just for sensationalism, I mean, it's kind of like the Maury Povich of tech information, right?
You're not the father.
I know. It's completely devoid of any value. It's just for shock, but the thing that frustrates me is that the narrative has now like gotten legs. I know that jerry rig everything. I know that Zach has done like one of his bend tests in the back of the phone broke.
But there's value to that.
There is. I will agree with you, but I also
There's shock value.
But I also think one thing that I remember reading is that because of the design with the titanium frame and everything, the back is more replaceable now than it ever has been. So it could be that because the back is maybe not adhered in the same way or something like that, that it is more fragile.
So two things that took me aback with that was like, we know that we do know that they're supposed to be easier to repair now.
Right.
So to make it easy to repair, that's probably a trade-off. But when you have the titanium sides, if the back is not made out of titanium, it's going to give out first because the frame's not going to bend. So all that energy is going to go straight to where your fingers are at. I wasn't so concerned about the glass breaking, but when I saw the back plate under the glass start to crack and cave in, that was the bigger concern for me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think once again, like Apple probably tried to build some of this in, and not because they wanted to, get the right to repair folks off their back, but because here's what usually happens. If you have Apple Care and you drop your phone and the back screen breaks, or the back panel and the screen breaks or something like that, 9 times out of 10, if you went to the Apple store with your phone, they just give you a new phone because repairing the back panel was almost impossible. It was just so labor intensive and so difficult to do, and the glass itself is so thin that they would just give you a new phone. Okay, what's your theory?
Well, so the other thing, we know that who is the biggest trade-in factor whenever it comes to phones. Like if you're getting an iPhone, likely you're trading your phone back into Apple. Apple gets so many of these trade-in units. If you try to trade in an iPhone 14 Pro with a cracked glass back on it, the trade-in value is zero. They're like, well, you can give it to us for e-waste, right?
Right.
Well, they also are very big in refurbish. They even refurbish and sell their own products now on their store line.
Yeah.
If you can spend $200, which that's what they charge, but I'm sure it didn't cost them that much. But it was a much more intensive cost and process to do that before. Right. So now that it's easier, if you have a cracked back, they're still going to tell you $0. But then they're going to turn around and put a new back on it and refurbish, sell it probably for like $100 less than MSRP.
Well, that's what they've always done with their computers too. I mean, so they refurbish a laptop, and in refurbishing the laptop, it usually means a brand new screen, brand new inside, brand new keyboard, sometimes brand new insides entirely, and they just reuse the frame.
Yeah.
So that's why, I mean, it's a double-edged sword though, because you know that they're like maximizing their profit twice over, right? But if you buy an Apple refurbished Apple device, you know that that device is pretty much as good as new.
Well, it has the same manufacturer warranty, I believe.
Yeah. And so that's always been like a really good way to go if you wanted to get an Apple device, but you needed more power than you could afford buying new, or if you just were more cash strapped than you wanted to be. There's always the opportunity to go to the Apple refurbished store. Mm-hmm. It's interesting too, because if you go to Apple's website, like along their little bar at the top, there's no place to go to the refurbished store.
No, you have to Google it. Yeah.
It's
a separate store link.
Yeah. I think you can search on Apple's website for refurbished. But
a lot of people don't know that you can get them refurbished. I didn't know that until like a little while ago. I was like, oh, wow, this is great. I'll save 10%.
Yeah. It's you can get a good deal on there. Especially if there are models that are, say, like 2+ years old, and maybe they don't have too many of them left, but then they kind of blow them out, and you can get like a 2020 iMac 27-inch for a third of its original cost, right? So
and it's still gonna be good for years. So yeah.
But in terms of the iPhone, I mean, my experience so far, and I was at best complacent about the release of a new iPhone, right? I mean, it's pretty much across the board with smartphones these days. There's not a lot of game-changing features that come up, right? And I certainly haven't put this through its paces and really tested all the different features, but I can say that my overall experience from turning this on and transferring everything over from my 12 Pro Max, the experience of using this phone has been one of the better iPhone experiences that I've had. And some of that boils down to the titanium. It's much lighter by far. Or at least, I don't know what the actual weight difference is. It might just be a few ounces, but
I think it's 19 grams. I want to say it's like 1.5 ounces or something.
But holding it in your hand, the phone is ever so slightly smaller. I look at the Pro Max now, and it kind of looks to me in my hand like a smaller, like a Pro.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't gotten a case yet, so I'm just like holding it, using it bareback, and kind of experiencing it. And I'm really impressed. I haven't dug into all the different features of iOS 17, but there have been things that have popped up here and there that I've been like, oh, that's cool. You know, it's a little bit easier than it was before. And the responsiveness of this phone, maybe it's coming from a 12 Pro Max, and this phone just feels like very fluid. You know, Android phones often feel snappy. You know, like they're just doing and iOS, of course, is built with a lot of different animations that make it.
It's smooth, but fluid. It's not like, does it feel lightning fast sometimes?
Yeah, but it's very fluid.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really honestly have been enjoying using this phone a lot more than I thought I would, because I really, like last year, my video for the iPhone 14 Pro Max it's a purple iPhone.
And that's the best feature ever for me in an iPhone, because purple's my favorite color. So I'm having a hard time with the idea of letting go of my Pro Max.
But I got the titanium, the natural titanium. When I was in the store, I asked the guy's like, which model do you want? And I was like, titanium. And he's like, they're all titanium. I was like, all right, fucker.
Yeah, thanks for the cheeky response. I know that, douchebag.
Yeah. I had to specify natural titanium. And when you looked at the photos, and even the photo on the box, the raised embossed photo, it looks kind of gold. And when I opened it up, you can kind of hear my reaction in my first impression video, like that.
Yeah, it doesn't look gold.
It doesn't look gold at all, and the back color is like really sexy.
It kind of caught me off until I went to the store and I got it, and I was sitting there and I've got my Apple Watch Ultra, which is titanium.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, it looks a lot like that color. I'm like, really? That's not what it looked like to me in the marketing images.
Yeah.
And then you pull it out and you're like, yeah, it kind of looks really similar.
Yeah, and it's funny, so they call the white phone silver. They've always called the white phone silver because I guess because it had silver edges, right?
Silver was the one I would always get until gold came around.
I had the gold 12 Pro Max, but only because that was what my wife had, and I just traded her when I gave her the 14 Pro Max. I've always been like a space black or whatever black there is. That's always been my choice. But this silver color, this titanium natural color, is to me like such a really nice combination of a darker color. It has a slightly darker tone, but it's also not dark. If that makes sense.
And this is what the matching case looks like to go with it, which I really like this gray color, this flat gray.
Is that the silicone?
Yeah, this is it. So I'm gonna say something here. I think these cases are trash, but I love them because, like, when you get them, they feel so nice and silky. They fit like a glove, and they're very minimal. And I really like the cases, but the silicone exterior just peels off like a grape.
Yeah, I've had the silicone case where it, like, along the edge,
like, they get all chewed up,
and it starts to pull apart and show the frame inside.
Yeah.
Now the silicone cases used to be much more durable.
Oh, they were way more durable, but they also used to pick up a lot more lint too.
Yeah, I do like the feel of the silicone case. It's important for me that a case have some sort of grip to it. And that's one thing that bothers me about a lot of cases. Like I want to be able to show off the color of this phone, but I'm really reluctant to get a clear case because clear cases to me have always just gotten super greasy, super
they feel
covered.
gross.
Yeah, and I've just never liked that. And then, the more poorly made ones turn yellow after 9 months to a year. So it's
3-4 months.
that, yeah. But I have to admit now, I'm all for eco-friendliness, and I recognize that climate control is real and we haven't done enough to offset it. But taking away my leather case, taking away my Apple leather case,
we're talking to you, Tim,
and giving me that fine woven trash. I mean, I saw one at Best Buy and I was just like, this. I mean, maybe if I hadn't had leather before, I would be okay with this. But this is not it. This is like the iPod sock. Remember the iPod sock?
Yeah.
I mean, one of the worst products, or at least one of the worst accessories that Apple has ever released, the iPod sock. Where, if you don't remember this, the iPod sock was a sort of a case for an iPod. It was basically a sock in many different colors it had the rings around it like a sock, and you would just put your iPod inside the sock. You couldn't use it while it was in there. I mean, you could use it, but you couldn't interact with it. Yeah. I don't know, but what kind of what kind of drop protection do you get from a woven sock?
I mean, zero. It's just like it's come back. I mean, it's almost as useless. Like, remember the Nokia, like the Nokia brick, as everybody calls it, and remember that there was actually companies that would make cases for it. Like, this thing is going to survive a nuclear blast already.
Like, I could use this as a personal protective device. I don't know if it needs a case.
Yeah,
but
the most useless accessory ever.
But I the fine woven, because it's not even the fine woven fabric sort of all across the whole thing. It's like fine woven the back with rubber sides.
It feels like cheap garbage.
Yeah, and you take away my leather case and give me that, I'm just no. And so I go to Best Buy and I look, and everything is plastic. Everything is plastic except for, like, say, the Presidio grip from Spec. Yeah. And that design's been around forever.
Yeah, it's been around forever.
Much like silicone cases of the past, as you said, it catches a lot of gunk.
But it's very durable. They don't delaminate. They don't peel. Right. Like, none of that stuff. Like, Spec makes good stuff, but they're bulky and they're way overpriced.
Yeah, and for me, like, if I'm going to put a case on the phone, I want it to. It's not a utility thing anymore. Like, I carried my iPhone 12 Pro Max caseless for months at a time, and never had any problem with cracks or breaks or I didn't really drop it too often. But
there's two different types of people. There's like you and me who treat this thing like a baby, and then there's people who get Apple Care, like the Max Weinbachs of the world, who break it like 8 times. And it looks like it's been run over, and he's like, oh, well, this one's messed up now.
Well, you know what the difference between you and me and Max Weinbach is? We're not 20.
Yeah, there's that too. Yeah, I'm going to be 40 in stinking January, man.
Hey, man, next month I'm going to be 52, so I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about
person here.
Yeah, because, man, after 50, I don't care what anybody says. You start to do the reductive math, like. Retirement age is less than 15 years away now. And not that I'll probably ever retire, but, I don't want to. It's weird to, like, when I went full time on YouTube at 48, it didn't seem like as big a deal. But when you're 4 years full time on YouTube at 52, and it's like, wait a minute, the years are going by. But I think that, we live a different lifestyle than a college kid, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So Max Weinbach and other college kids are probably going out to bars or to college events or hanging out at their friends' houses, things that I just don't do at all. And so I could see it getting broken more, but I could also see maybe using a case if that were my lifestyle. But I always loved the Apple OEM cases because nobody made a better case than the company that made the phone.
Well, for sure.
And Samsung has been sort of hit and miss with theirs. They make some designs that are just like, what in the world is this?
Their leather cases, though, they use the like. So I like the Apple leather cases, but they just got thinner and thinner and thinner.
Yeah,
It's like so thin. I will like if I get like a Z Flip phone, the leather that they use for their, or I get like the S series, I always buy the leather case because their leather is just so nice. I love those cases.
But now, I mean, you have to go to third parties, and I know that there are several that do a good job. But the ones that I've seen that have been probably the nicest with the highest quality leather and stuff have been like the Nomad brand.
Oh yeah,
cases.
I've been working with them a long time. Nomad's fantastic, and the thing about Nomad, and like, of course, it's not sponsored by Nomad, but
hashtag not sponsored.
Hashtag not sponsored. Some fantastic people,
but open to conversations.
Yeah, yeah. So I've worked with them for a long time. Like they would send me cases. Like before I ever started making YouTube videos, I actually used to write articles with like the community review team section in the forums on Crackberry and Android Central and stuff like that. And they would send me cases back then, and I'm like, man, I love these things. And I thought it was great because like, yeah, they'll send me a $60 case, and I'm a nobody. But I use them for years because they're just such. I'm still using this Nomad wallet I've had for like 6 years, right? Because it's just the leather's so good.
Yeah. Another thing that I noticed shopping for cases the other day is that all the cases are super freaking expensive now.
Oh yeah, $60 basically.
Yeah, there was a UAG case that I was kind of interested in. It was $80.
Was it the Monarch?
Yeah, it was $80, and I was just like, I mean, it's a nice case, but you know, OtterBox used to be like head and shoulders above everything else.
They were like $39.
Yeah, you know, and if you went to the Defender, I think it was like 59 or something like that, and now everything is like 50 to 60 plus. And
so what I do now with if I'm going to buy a case, likely it's going to be Spigen just because they're like $17-$20. They got a couple of series that I like, and I'll buy one that I'm familiar with like before the phone comes out just so I have one. But the only exception is I almost exclusively now use the Apple silicone cases on the iPhones. I just get a new one like every 4 or 5 months because my OCD irks me so bad when they get a chip in them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I hadn't seen, because Best Buy didn't have, I can't go to an Apple store. We've talked about this. Apple Store's 2.5 hours away. There's only one in my state, so I don't get to go and peruse like the Apple branded cases very much because Best Buy just doesn't ever really get the whole line in stock. So
they get some. They get black, right? They'll always have like 2 colors, and then they're in the box, and then they're inside of plastic housing.
Yeah. So they did have the clear, and they did have the black silicone, but I didn't. We talked about why I don't want the clear, and the black is usually fine with me. But again, I really like the look of this phone more so than I think I've liked other iPhones.
That's what titanium I like.
The last iPhone color that I liked this much was the jet black on the 7.
Yeah, that was nice.
The matte black was really nice too, but the jet black was just dead sexy.
I was going to bring that up a minute ago when we were talking about colors because like white is a silver, the different blacks they've had over the years. But the jet black was like the first one I looked at. I'm like, dang it, I want this phone.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I did have a jet black iPhone 7 for a while. And if you don't put a case on it like immediately and breathe on it one time,
scratches,
you get like 10 scratches. So,
it reminds me of a piano finish,
that's what it is. Yeah. It was a super good looking phone though. I can't think of very many colors and finishes on phones that have been nicer than that.
I don't so much like the finish on the deep purple in the 14 Pro Max, but I love the deep purple color.
Yeah. The only other color that I've been super excited about was, the green. We talked about the iPhone 13 and 13 Pro green.
Yeah, the green was good.
Yeah, I like that. Because that's something that like will accessorize with my normal Because
that was the special color. The green was the special color for the 13. The purple was the 14, and the Pacific blue was for the 12.
Yeah. And now they have what looks like Pacific blue again.
Yeah, it's almost like it's Atlantic blue, maybe.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Slightly darker and more stormy.
Indian Ocean blue.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just very bizarre. But overall, in these first couple of days, my experience with the iPhone has been surprising. It's so weird because you could look at the specs and you can look at what the phone looks like, and you could say, oh, it's just an iterative, it's an iterative. Yes.
That word.
That word. It's just a few changes here and there and like the same phone. But then when I picked it up, I was like, it just had a different feel.
Well, your wonderment for the Wanderlust is a little bit different than mine because you've come from the 12 Pro Max.
Right.
I've come from the 14 Pro Max. And so when you go, I think the 12 series is probably the ideal beginning jumping point for upgrade cycles for this phone. Like 3 years, because when we went to the 13 Pro, we got promotion. There's no promotion in the 12. So you've got now promotion. You've got the new 48 megapixel camera. You've got the 5-time like telemetric, refractive, whatever, blah, 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 zoom. Yeah. We've got the action button, USB-C. Like if you look at the iPhone 12 Pro Max, there's a lot to be excited about going to the 15 Pro Max.
Well, I mean, and then if you add in the stuff that happened in the 14 and the 13, like what was it, cinematic mode?
Yeah, cinematic mode.
Plus the dynamic island. Plus there was something in the 13. So overall, I mean, yeah, I guess I've been so used to the heft and the feel of the sort of more boxed off phone when I grabbed this, and it didn't feel big like an iPhone Plus model or Pro Max model usually does. And it was, just ever so slightly rounded in places that it feels like a different phone in a way that I didn't expect it to. It's not not world changing by any stretch of the imagination, but I wasn't sure.
Very serviceable update.
Yeah, So I made a video earlier this year about how I was still using the 12 Pro Max in 2023 and why it was a good choice for me, and I think probably a good choice for other people. And I, of course, was planning on making an update video of that after the 15 comes out. And I was like 80% sure that I was going to say that, if you have the 12 Pro Max, it's a good upgrade, but you probably don't have to go for it, right? Mm-hmm. But I'll wait for longer because it's still like new car smell. But I would say that if you have right now, 2 days in, I would say if you have the 12 Pro Max or anything lower than that, then
solid.
Yeah, it's absolutely, you're absolutely gonna enjoy having this new phone.
And the nice thing too is, like, there's been a big push with the carriers over the last 2 or 3 years. We used to be in 24-month upgrade cycles for installment agreements.
Yeah.
And now a lot of them are these 36 months. So this is probably the first generation really of people with the 36-month financing agreements with their carriers.
Yeah.
Where you could walk in and effectively just hand it to them and get the new one likely for free or ish.
Yeah.
And I think it's meaningful. Like, we get down the weeds and stuff. Like, we're the tech community. We're the, like, oh my gosh, this and that. We get upset about things much more easily than most people. But year-over-year upgrades just aren't a thing. And I preach that a lot in my videos. I'm like, look, you shouldn't be buying a new phone year over year. Like, unless you just have to, if you've got the money and you don't care, YOLO, go for it. But there's no real reason usually to upgrade year over year, especially when these phones are $1,000, $1,200, $1,300. It's just stupid. But if you haven't had a phone in 3 years, it's exciting. It's new. And there's like 3 years of worth of actual kind of things that matter.
Yeah. I mean, they may have been iterative changes from 1 year to the next, but 3 years worth of iterative changes makes a pretty big difference in the experience.
Yeah. Like, you should totally make a video with like iPhone 12 Pro Max versus iPhone 15 Pro Max, why you should upgrade.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely will. I mean, I've promised a 72-hour update, which, I don't think my feelings are going to change all that much in the next, 18 to 20 hours. So, but I mean, yeah, I always like Apple does this sometimes. There's nothing really specifically that you can point to that is a feature that absolutely changes the experience of using the device, but something about all of the little tweaks
add up.
Yeah. And makes, to me, Apple at this point is that they're like jewelers, right? They're no longer like it's no longer like they're building a building with iron. They're now jewelers, like really finely honing very small details about the overall experience of their phone. And sometimes the sum of those small changes really does feel different. And so I guess, like I said, I've been much more pleased and much more impressed than I really expected to be.
So I've had a few things that have been less surprising. Well, I guess I like it just fine, but I mean, everybody knows I'm not the biggest iPhone fan. Like I'm not anti-iPhone. I'm very anti-Apple and the way they do things.
Fair enough.
But I respect the products. I mean, how can you sit there? You can't say the phone's bad. I mean, I don't believe iPhones are bad.
Yeah.
And I don't get that. Like, I'm not like, look, this phone sucks. This is a fantastic phone. There's a lot of people. I mean, they sold like 80 million of the suckers in the last year. They're by a wide margin number one in the US, clearly. But so for to go like, oh, Apple sucks. No, Apple's does suck. Like, I don't like them, but their products are very good.
Yeah.
It's just for me, they're very boring. Like I don't like that. I've got this amazing phone. I can't even move my icons around where I want to. Like it just drives me crazy. Like but it's all these idiosyncrasies other people appreciate and love. Yeah. And you can have like my grandmother uses one, right? I mean, my 85-year-old grandmother uses an iPhone and she loves it. And like she gets a new one, you restore from iCloud, bam, it's the exact same phone, right? So for me as a tech enthusiast and somebody who likes to have more control over my device, I appreciate Android. I appreciate the different flavors, foldables, stuff like that. So whenever I look at these phones, I use this. I'm like, okay, not the biggest iOS fan, but the only thing that's frustrating me so far is the battery life on my Pro has just not been good.
Right.
Like I made a tweet about it last night because I've tested two full battery cycles. And both days, about 4.5 hours for me of screen on time at 20%. I'm like, that's not good. But I was worried about this going in because that was my experience with the 14 Pro. And that's what drove me to get the Pro Max. So that's why when I said at the beginning of the story, there's a reason why I have both of these. I pre-ordered the Pro, but when I was at the Apple store, I was like, you don't have a Pro Max, do you? He's like, yeah, we have one 512 in blue. I was like, bring it to me right now. So I'm probably going to end up using the Pro Max again because I need the battery life. Like it doesn't even last me the entire day, but for probably 90% of creation, it probably does last all day. I am a very, like we talked earlier, we use our phones heavier, harder, and more than general pop.
And we also pay attention to our phones a lot more than the general population would. You know what I mean? We pay attention to we pay attention to how the battery drains. We pay attention to like the transitions and the animations and all this other stuff that
sensitivities.
Yeah, I mean, we've trained ourselves to have those sensitivities because A, we're interested, and B, we want to be able to relay these things to the people that watch our content. But yeah, I think for the average person, and I know people hate this. I know people who are like in the tech community hate this. But again, another clip that I saw from John Prosser's video the other day was, he was on a college campus or something and asked this 20-year-old girl, like, this is the 15, and it only has a 60 hertz refresh rate.
Mm-hmm.
Do you care? And her answer was, I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Well, here's my thing, and the thing that pissed me off about John Prosser video. Like, I don't hate John Prosser. What I don't like is people taking like extreme points of view to try and like, I don't know, either prove a point or to try and make themselves look better or make other people look stupid. For you to sit there and say to your 400,000 subscribers, like, if the person you watch is telling you this matters, they know nothing. Like, okay, dude, you can approach this differently. I understand you want sensationalism. Use a clickbait thing that says the iPhone 15 has a problem. The video wasn't about that. And it's not a problem because you're saying these people are a minority voice anyway. But if you're going to come out and bash people like, look, these people know nothing and it's not your job to educate people. Like, I believe that, here's one thing. I believe in education in my videos. Like, I try to educate people and talk about things that I think that the audience should know about. Not just, oh, this is amazing, it does this. Like, I believe there's a little bit more than that. So that's why his video offended me. If you're like, hey, you're like, I don't think this matters. Most people don't think this matters. It's not a big deal.
But here's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to get out there and say, look, all these people that are telling you this are stupid and don't know anything, like, I kind of, that rubs me the wrong way.
I mean, I get what he's saying, and I understand where you're coming from, because, like, you know, it's clickbait and it's sensationalism for the sake of pulling in views, which, I mean,
is our job.
Well, that's what we're supposed to do, and I've been known to do it as much as anybody else, and John is very, very good at it. He has a disposition that is challenging in his videos. Mm-hmm. So you know, take that with whatever grain of salt you want. But, you know, I take his point. I don't necessarily agree with maybe the way it's stated, but for the average YouTuber who would go on, and I think most, because I've seen this in comments as well, and I'm sure you have too. I pointed it out last night in a tweet that I made. You know, somebody says iPhone sucks, Samsung only, or they, you know, and I
get those all the time.
I had this mental picture of, like, some drooling idiot got a hold of someone's phone and just, like, found their way to my comment section. It's like, why would you? Obviously, you don't have to be a user or a fan of any particular phone, but, you know, making these overall huge blanket statements, like, it's not even an argument.
It's logical fallacies.
Yeah, you're just like making overblown statements that you couldn't back up if you ever wanted to. And so this is always the problem with internet arguments. Is like, okay, I want you to back up this ridiculous position that you just backed yourself into. and then all you get is goalpost moving. You know, as soon as you refute one point, they'll move the goalpost back again.
Oh yeah.
And it's frustrating to me. And I have a feeling that whether it's an iPhone or a Samsung device or whatever device it might be, John's probably reacting to the same thing, which is that a lot of times people overstate these things and then they move the goalposts.
A lot of it is overblown. Like my whole argument with the entire, I'm not going to draw this out, but my whole argument with the no 120 hertz is like, why are we paying $800 for a phone that doesn't have this? Like, there's a lot of stuff in, like, but mine's not just the 120 hertz.
Right.
It's also like it has slow charging. It has 2 cameras. Like there's just, I mean, I ripped the S22 Plus apart, S23 Plus apart for the same thing. Like, why are we paying $1,000 for a phone with a 6.6 inch screen with 1080p?
Yeah.
Like, so it's not so much that, I think that people care. It's, I feel like Apple's just selling a subpar product for more money because they can, because people don't care.
And my sort of counterpoint to that would be Apple believes that they're selling an experience, and the experience is probably not overall affected in, you know, if you need faster charging speeds, or if you need faster device transfer speeds and that kind of thing, then they make a pro device for that. You know,
well, that's exactly why they do that, because they know, like, it. One, people just buy them because they have the name Pro in them, because they want to feel like they've got the best.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like a lot of the features they put in there are Pro. It's not a Pro. Like, in the Android world, it's standard fare. It's like a glass of water. You know, it's everywhere. And then in Apple, that's a Pro feature, sir.
Well, like, the thing is that, so the way that when Apple first started calling the higher end iPhones Pro models, right? That this was a huge argument. What is Pro? And my response to it is, like, if you're a professional at whatever you do and you use your iPhone in that professional setting, then you can easily call it Pro. I mean, like, Pro is not like an adjective. Pro is like a verb. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so I always kind of push back
this
on
is
that.
why I hate Apple.
But to me, like the thing about the 15 and the 15 plus is that I think there are probably plenty of people out there that are happy to have an iPhone at that price point.
I'm sure that 95% of people that pick one up will grab it. They'll be happy about it. They're more excited about the color than they are about the fact that, like, they don't even know it's a screen. And that's like, I understand. And he was talking about, we don't understand the market. I understand the market. Like, I understand the market really well. But my argument is not a market based. It's not what it is. I don't expect that me and 3 other people yelling into the void are going to change anything. It's just for me and my audience, which is who I'm talking to, they care. And it's something that they care about. And I think a lot of it also is education. Because, like, my wife could care less. Like, she couldn't care less about what phone she had until we got her a pro model phone. Because I had my Samsung phone, and I was like, look, honey, this is 120 hertz. She's like, why does this look so much better than my phone? And now she won't use a phone that doesn't have it. And my wife is as non-phone person as you could possibly believe. And she's like, the only reason she has a pro model phone is because she loves the screen so much because it looks better.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I think that it's a misrepresentation to say that people who review phones don't understand the market. That's John putting himself in the position of, like, I know more than you because whatever.
Yeah.
The thing is, like you said, for one thing, you're making a video for the people who watch your videos. So that's one layer of it.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also understand the market and still be critical of particular decisions. So I can understand that most people who go in to buy a phone are going to ask what color you have it in.
Exactly. Or what storage size.
Yeah. And even these days, with how optimized iCloud is and how optimized Google Drive or Google One or whatever the hell they're calling it right today, like, the storage doesn't matter, because are you putting movies on your phone? No, you're streaming. Are you putting music files on your phone? No, you're streaming, right?
Yeah.
And if you're going to be in a place where you can't stream, then you can very easily download stuff from Netflix or from Apple Music or Spotify or whatever, and have them locally on your phone. But it's not there intended to be like a repository of it, right?
Yeah.
So I think, and I've said this before, I think 128 gigabytes is the sweet spot for the majority of all people who are going to use a smartphone.
I think that's fair. And, whenever they bumped up all of them to 128 last year, I was really happy about that.
Yeah.
Because I think that the normal pedestrian iPhone needed 128. But as a pro model, like, I think there is a distinction. I wish it had 256, because it's like, if you have the 128 model, you can't even record ProRes in 4K because the video files are too big. So it's funny because Apple has kind of backed them into a problem where there are sometimes differentiating factors within even their pro models. It's like, well, is it pro or is it not pro? Because the iPhone 15 Pro has the 3 times optical that we had for the last year. And now the Pro Max has the 5 times. They're not even the same. So how do you distinguish within the Pro if they're not identical?
Yeah, I guess it comes down to, like, well, is video going to be a big part of your Pro usage? If so, then probably the 15 is, or a larger size of storage is going to be your choice, right?
Well, also, what's really one feature that's very silent for most people who use iPhones, that's really exciting for me, which I don't even record in ProRes, but you can now connect this to an external storage and record directly to it. That is a pro feature. Like, that is fantastic.
It certainly is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that, I mean, I've been thinking about buying a third camera, right? Mm-hmm. Something that, like, I like to keep this stuff that's here, mm-hmm. so that I don't have to set it up and, all that kind of stuff.
Sit down, hit record, you're good.
Yeah. But I've been thinking about buying a third camera because I also want to be able to take something with me and not just be sitting in this setting. now that the iPhone can record to separate media,
That's fantastic.
And then you don't even have to worry about transferring from your iPhone to, you don't have to worry about AirDrop. You don't have to
iCloud, it's already there. It's great.
Although when they announced that USB-C was coming to the iPhones, I did record 4K. It wasn't ProRes, but 4K, pretty long clip, right? And it was for a video. And I don't even remember when the last time it was that I plugged my iPhone into a computer, right? Mm-hmm. But I took the Lightning cable in my 12 Pro Max and, plugged this. It was like a 55-minute clip because I was doing the review of the karaoke machine. Mm-hmm. And I just did it all in one take, and I sang a bunch of songs, and so I didn't end up using a lot of the footage, but I didn't bother stopping and starting and that kind of thing. So it was like a 55-minute 4K clip, and it transferred way faster than I thought it would. And that was with like a USB 2.0 connection.
Well, the nice thing, one of the beauties of iPhone and video, and it's like I tell people I hate iPhones, but I use one to record on my video. Like I run a business recording video on my iPhone. Do I want to carry it around and use it? No, but it's amazing. It's amazing for video.
Yeah.
And for compression purposes, the quality of video you get. So let's say I record every day. I record 4K 60 frames per second, usually about a 10 to 12 minute video. It's like 3 gigabytes. Like the compression and the quality, and then you airdrop it to your MacBook. It takes like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
It's so good. And Android is just so far off from that.
And when you actually use ProRes and you edit in Final Cut Pro, it's
optimized for it.
Yeah, ProRes is the native format for Final Cut Pro. The one last thing that I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to get your opinion on, is that so Samsung doesn't have the market share that they want.
No.
Apple is eating them alive, right?
Well, in the U.S. at least, anyway. Globally still, but U.S.
Yeah, so they want to somehow figure out how to change that for the better. Mm-hmm. And here's their grand plan. BTS didn't work, right?
No, it didn't. That was great in South. Actually, I think it helped them a lot in South Korea. But
I'm sure it did. But I mean, and I know that BTS is popular over here, but I just don't think that they're as influential. Perhaps. So Samsung has hooked up now with Mr. Beast. Making Mr. Beast has now made the S23 Ultra his official quote unquote vlogging cam.
Yeah.
Which
it's good for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I had the S23 Ultra for a week before the iPhone came out because I hadn't tried it.
Mine's on the floor.
I have to say the limited amount of time that I used the camera, I used it to make a video, like get some B-roll shots outside of my house. It looked great, and it worked really well. Although I was really annoyed at the fact that there's no 24 frames. Like 4K 30, 4K 60. What about 4K 24?
It's so odd to me that 8K they'll allow 24 and 30.
Yeah,
but not 4K. It's like 30 and 60.
Yeah, I don't get it because I think the majority of people still want to film in 24.
Well, if you ask MKBHD anyway, it's the ideal frame. I mean, it's cinematic. Like that's what you watch movies in.
You get more of the motion blur, so everything looks a little bit more natural. Now, if you want to take screen caps from your footage and use that in your thumbnail, 24 frames is challenging because there's so much movement blur that it's really hard to catch. Like, if your hand's moving, it's really hard to catch it in a frame that it's not blurred out, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've released videos in 60 frames. I've released videos in 30 frames, and I've done 24 frames. And they all have a quality.
Yeah, and you can tell, like, when you look at them, like, your eyes, they'll pick up on it.
I think that 30 and 60 both give a more sort of, I guess, like, cinema verite, kind of like this is coming from real life, right?
Yeah, they feel like
it's a home movie kind of feel, right? It's better than a home movie, but it just has that feel of television, maybe.
Yeah.
Because television was always in 30 frames because of the refresh rate of the screens.
Mhm.
So I get that. But what do you think? I mean, Mr. Beast obviously is like the 5-time reigning YouTuber of the world.
Super heavyweight champion of the world. So I think it's brilliant, honestly. And it's funny because there's been a big push away from YouTubers into more influencers with a lot of brands over the last year or two. So seeing them go and grab Mr. Beast, because of course he's it. You know, everybody knows who Mr. Beast is. His chocolate bars are in Walmart. Your kids watch Mr. Beast videos. So to see him, it's like Michael Jordan in Jordan shoes. It's like, hey, Mr. Beast uses a Samsung phone.
Yeah, I wonder. It's a good question, because a lot of times these fashion choices, and Jordan's is a good example, because I grew up in the age of the original Jordans, and and if you came into school with like the Kmart knockoff version of Jordans, you were
ridiculed.
You were a piker, man. It was like,
you came in wearing a pair of British Knights or some earwings from Payless, and you were like, kids would roast you. It was terrible.
Yeah. And so I get it, but I wonder
how effective it's actually going to be.
I would imagine that people watch Mr. Beast for like what's happening in the video, right? And unless he's doing like cool integrated sponsor, and now let's do this vlog segment with the Samsung S23 Ultra. Unless he does that, like how many people are going to actually be influenced in it? Because nobody cares what camera he's using.
No, they don't care if it's a Komodo, whatever, a Red.
I mean, Samsung might have been better suited to like get MKBHD. I
don't think MKBHD would do that though.
No, I don't either. However, I just think that his videos are entertainment videos, right?
Yeah, 100% entertainment.
And so I just don't know. Like, are kids going to go to their mom and dad when it's time for them to get a smartphone and be like, oh, I got to have the S whatever it is this year Ultra because Mr. Beast uses it.
I don't even think that's the objective though. I think the objective is just to put it out there as like a quality thing, like just let people know, like, look, we do this with the Samsung, right? There's not a lot in the US. Like, you see posters, you see billboards, but how do you find a way to compete with the Church of Apple? Like, Apple's like so big in the United States.
Well, and part of that is because Apple has, they're as much a marketing entity as they are a technology company.
Oh, for sure.
And you got to remember that Apple's marketing,
social engineering.
Yeah. Well, no, and there are books. The book Primal Branding. If you read that, it's a little older, but it still has a lot of really good basic ideas about how you build a brand that has its own culture, right? Mm-hmm. So one of them is traditions, or sort of rituals is the word that they use, but then also just so iPhone release every year is way different in how it impacts the people who pay attention to Apple.
Oh yeah,
it's going to church. Every Apple event is like,
it's like Easter, like the Apple launch day. You see these thousands. Like, did you see how many people there were outside of the Apple store in New York City? I did. And Tim Cook came out and he's like the Pope. He's freaking like the Pope. I'm just like, namaste there, Tim. Welcome out and take a few pictures. It's just Steve Jobs used to do that too. I mean, he didn't make it look like a religious ceremony, but what's funny though? What's funny? I was thinking about this the other day. Like, I miss Steve Jobs. Like, I never liked Apple, but I love Steve Jobs.
Yeah,
and people don't look at Tim Cook the same way.
See, Steve Jobs there was a cult of personality around Steve Jobs.
Oh yeah, for sure.
He was iconoclastic. He was his own guy. He was both visionary, but also very, very like tough when it came to business. And so he became super iconoclastic. Like, they've made 2 videos or 2 movies, that dramatize portions of his life. Okay, There ain't nobody gonna make the biopic of Tim Cook.
Tim Cook. Yeah, I mean, that'll be a Netflix special in 5 years after he retires.
I mean,
there will be one, but
that's nothing against Tim Cook either. Yeah. I mean, Tim Cook has been a very effective, probably you could argue a much more effective CEO of Apple than Steve Jobs was.
He's taken. Sorry, go ahead.
No, however, like he doesn't inspire that cult of personality.
No.
So it's a little.
I wish we had like one of those Marvel what if movies, but if Steve Jobs were still here right now, what would Apple look like?
Man, I don't even know. I mean, I think that in the large strokes, I think that Apple would still be going somewhat in the same direction. I don't think that he would allow it to be as slow and steady wins the race iterative as their major product.
Be a little more aggressive with the products.
Yeah, I think that Vision Pro is something like Vision Pro is a natural progression. So we might have seen that a few years ago instead of like next year.
But would it have been as ready?
That's the thing. I don't know.
And that's kind of it's an interesting thought. But going back to the whole Mr. Beast thing, I don't think it's necessarily so much into. I think it's just to get the name Samsung in some people's mouths and in their eyes whenever they think about phones, instead of just not necessarily going to convert as many immediate sales as to try and establish more of that brand identity.
And it, like I say, I feel like it's a very interesting tactic to go with someone who's so popular at such a large scale, because sponsorships like that are often intrusive, right? And so if you like, let's say Mr. Beast was famous for wearing Nikes, right? Mm-hmm. And Adidas or whoever came along and said, "Hey, we'll give you $500,000 to wear these shoes instead of the Nikes every time." Every time you made a video, and we have to have, X number of shots of the shoes in the video every single time, right?
Yeah, it would start to change the makeup of the video.
Yeah.
And I worry, like, I've watched a video or listened to Mr. Beast talk. He's like, we've done science. Like, there has to be a transition every 8 seconds because that's when people start losing attention. I wonder how much drop off there was in his retention in that short span where they start talking about Samsung. And if it's enough that it impacts his overall video, he'll drop them like that.
Well, so there's so many things I think about this.
All right, that's a really good stopping point.
Yeah, that's a good place to stop. We've been going on. What I love about doing this is that everything is so kind of like stream of consciousness, where like one subject bleeds into the next just referentially. So, but we set a goal for about how much time we're going to talk.
And and I did a poll yesterday on my channel because I was asking just for people who had seen it, because I've shared these on my YouTube like community channel, like the 2 videos we did. I was like, hey, have y'all enjoyed the podcast that we've done so far? And 481 votes, but 33% say it's great. So that's good. There's only 5% they didn't like it. And then 54% were like, I didn't know that you had done that. So I shared over there. Like I think that,
but now they do.
I've gotten a pretty good response. People like, I really enjoyed watching that. They're like, yeah, it's like I just turn it on and listen to it. I like listening to you guys talk.
Yeah, no, I've gotten a lot of that too in the comments and other places where I've shared it. So it's fun. I like just conversational podcasts. Sometimes if a podcast is too controlled, then it feels artificial, and it gives it. See, I'm rigging the system myself.
Yes,
by making all this stuff stream of consciousness and not giving people breaks.
You have to listen because you're gonna miss it.
Anyway, thanks so much, folks, for watching. Once again, thank you to Adam. Tech Odyssey, you got to check him out over on the Tech Odyssey channel. Now you have to learn.
Unless you're an Apple fan, don't go watch my videos.
Well, it's all good. No, but you'll have to figure out how to spell Odyssey. It's one of the more difficult words, but
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks so much for being here. Thanks, Adam, for co-hosting again. And yeah, we'll be back next week with some more stuff. I don't know what
stuff.
the
Something
news,
loosely tech related.
yeah, loosely tech related and somehow connected to things that have happened in the previous week. So thanks so much for being here once again. My name is Jason. Sometimes there's the JTL Painfully Honest Tech, the podcast so honest it hurts. Until the next time we are out.